You know, it's a funny thing. Some of the most genuinely gifted people in the world have absolutely no idea. And it's not because they're just being modest. It's because the very way their mind is wired can make them feel, a lot of the time, like something is fundamentally wrong with them. Today, we're going to unpack that quiet paradox.
Have you ever had that feeling deep down that you just experience things more deeply than other people? Or that you're always searching for some kind of meaning that seems just out of reach? Well, this might just bring some things into focus for you. And look, we're not talking about IQ scores or being a genius. We're talking about subtle psychological patterns that researchers have been piecing together for decades.
And that right there, that's the heart of it. That's the central paradox. The things that really signal a gifted mind aren't always loud, obvious achievements. Nope. They're often quiet, internal experiences that can feel way more like a burden than a gift. Okay, so let's dive right in. We're going to start by really looking at this paradox, and then we'll get into what it means to have an intensely wired brain. From there, we'll explore a totally different way of thinking, that nagging feeling of being out of sync with everyone, and the real weight that this gift can carry, before we land on one final powerful insight. First up, let's talk about the hardware itself. The gifted brain isn't just, faster. It's fundamentally wired to experience the entire world with a whole different level of intensity. So the very first sign is something called overexcitability. Now, this doesn't mean hyperactivity, not at all. Think of it like your nervous system is permanently set to high definition. For you, a piece of music isn't just nice to listen to, you can literally feel it moving through your body. An interesting idea doesn't just catch your attention, it can completely consume you for days. This isn't about being fragile, it's sensitivity in the truest sense of the word. It's being deeply, intensely alive.
The second sign is this incredible, unusual emotional depth. So, if you spent your life being told you're too sensitive, this one's for you. Research is actually showing this isn't some kind of personality flaw, it's a neurological reality. The brain's emotional center, the amygdala, seems to operate with way more reactivity. You don't feel more because you're weak, you feel more because your brain is literally built to do it. And sign number 3, your relationship with boredom. For a highly active mind, boredom isn't just dull, it can feel almost physically painful. It's not a lack of focus. It's your brain desperately, urgently searching for meaningful stimulation. And when it can't find that input, it starts creating its own, which can feel a lot like restlessness or anxiety.
So that's the intensely wired brain. Now let's shift gears and see how that wiring affects how you actually process information. This leads us to a completely different way of thinking, and this is where some of the most unique patterns really start to show up. Sign number 4. You are driven by a single, powerful question. Why? Probably since you were a little kid, you've had this insatiable need to understand the real mechanics behind things, not just to accept them because someone said so. While everyone else might want a quick, easy answer, you want the whole messy picture, and you're perfectly comfortable sitting with complicated ideas that don't have a neat solution. Our fifth sign is something called divergent thinking. Basically, your mind doesn't just travel on a straight line from A to B to C. It moves in webs, making these incredible intuitive leaps between totally unrelated concepts. In fact, neuroscience shows that gifted individuals often have greater neural connectivity between parts of the brain that don't normally talk to each other. Your brain is literally built to see patterns that everyone else misses.
And this sixth sign, this one might surprise you. A powerful, almost primal sense of justice. And we're talking about more than just following the rules here. It's a deep, gut-level, visceral reaction to unfairness that usually shows up really early in life. This moral sensitivity can make just living in the world an emotionally exhausting experience because you notice and feel every single injustice that other people just seem to brush past.
So, you've got this intense inner world, this unique way of thinking. But what happens when all that clashes with the world outside? Well, that brings us to the next part of this whole experience, that constant, nagging feeling of being out of sync. Sign number 7 is this persistent feeling of being just slightly out of step with everyone around you. It's one of the most common things reported by gifted adults, but it's often a really quiet and lonely experience. It's not about being arrogant or thinking you're better than anyone. It's just about operating on a different frequency and the quiet, low-grade exhaustion that comes from constantly having to tune yourself down just to match the room. And that feeling leads directly to our 8th sign, intellectual camouflage. This is a subtle process, but it's so powerful.
You learn pretty quickly that being too intense or too curious or too quick can make other people uncomfortable. So you adapt, you learn to hide it. And the real tragedy here is that over time, this camouflage can become so second nature that you might actually forget what you're even capable of. All that friction on the outside, it almost always creates a heavy burden on the inside. So for this next section, let's look inward at what we're calling the weight of the gift. And honestly, these are often the most hidden signs of them all. Number 9 is a fierce, relentless internal perfectionism. And this has nothing to do with impressing other people. It's driven by this painful gap between the incredibly high, complex, beautiful standard your mind can envision and what you can actually manage to produce in reality. Because you have this high metacognitive ability, which is just a fancy way of saying you're good at judging your own thinking, you are, by design, your own harshest critic.
And our 10th and final sign, the imposter phenomenon. Ooh, this one runs deep for gifted individuals. And you want to know why? It's because your awareness of how much you don't know is so massive, so vast, that it constantly overshadows everything you do know. Your mind is always reaching for what's next, so it never really settles down and enjoys a feeling of accomplishment.
So wow, we've walked through all 10 signs. If any of this is hitting home for you, not just like a checklist, but as a genuine, deep recognition of your own quiet experiences, we would love to hear from you down in the comments. And of course, if you like what we're doing, hitting that like and subscribe button really helps us make more explainers just like this one. Okay, so after going through all of these signs, what's the big takeaway here? What's the point? Let's tie all of this together in our final section. Here is the most crucial thing to understand. Giftedness, in a psychological sense, isn't about trophies or test scores or what you achieve. It is, fundamentally, about a different way of processing reality, more intensely, more deeply, and just more relentlessly. And that brings us to the final and maybe the most important insight of all. If this has resonated with you, I want you to consider this your permission slip. Permission to stop apologizing for how deeply you think or how strongly you feel. Those things, they aren't problems that need to be solved. They are the very shape of your mind. And really, truly understanding that shape, well, that's where something important can finally begin.